Live.
All right.
All right. Welcome to Overgrow the System podcast to Zarathanarchy. You want to plug yourself?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, first of all. But yeah, Zarathanarchy on Twitter. That's pretty much it. That's all I got going on.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll link it up on your page, obviously, when I record it. Well, I mean, we are recording it once I get it published. I mean,
Yeah. It's good
so
to be here, man.
today,
Thanks for having me on.
today we're looking forward to talking about blacksmithing. Hey,
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a thing that I've been doing, for the past year-ish, maybe a year and a half. But yeah, going well, and that's a really fun thing to be doing all the time. So I know you're into it as well, so that's always a good thing.
yeah, I love it. I mean, it was something that I started doing when I was injured because I didn't have much else to do, and you don't really need to walk around very much.
Right.
So that was good.
Yeah, I mean, how did you get turned on to it yourself? Because I mean, personally, my story is it's basically like I got really bored after grad school, and I was like working at a job, and you know, I wanted to do something with my hands, so I started looking around, and I just came up with that.
Do some foraging.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I've always been really into it. Like as a kid, I was reading these books, and my favorite character in the books was this blacksmith. So I've always had a pretty strong interest in blacksmithing. And
Hmm.
then when I injured myself, I fell off a roof, and I was in a wheelchair for like a year. So I had a lot of time to kill. And I found Alex Steele's channel on YouTube. I know you're a fan of his too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And when I found that, it was awesome because it was like, I could blacksmith vicariously. I didn't have to just sit around in a wheelchair all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No,
sorry, Karen.
No, I was just gonna say, my journey in blacksmithing actually turned out with Alex Steele the same. Like it wasn't, I didn't get injured or anything, but I was, just started this new job with the company I'm at now, and I was, getting home tired as hell, and I would just sit down and watch this guy make this stuff, and it just blossomed from there, and carried on into other stuff, other YouTube channels, and then I got my own stuff and started playing around with it, and that was super cool. And I sort of remembered back in the day when I was a little kid. Um, we when I was in primary school, we went to it was like this reenactment festival. I sort of lived around the Gettysburg area back then, and the Civil War reenactors and all those guys, they would get together and they would do all these things to bring you back to the Civil War times, and the armorers and all that kind of stuff. And there was a blacksmith there, and he gave me a nail, and I sort of remembered that going forward, and I thought that was so cool that he could take raw material and just make something super useful out of it. As a kid, you don't think about that too much, but as a 32-year-old adult, it's sort of a big deal to be like, wow, I can take this stuff and make something out of it, and do cool things. So that sort of got me turned on to it. But then Alex Steele's like, oh, I'm gonna make these fucking big ass knives, and it just sort of took off from there. So
Yeah, he's pretty inspiring. It's hard to watch a 19-year-old kid do it and think, well, why couldn't I?
oh yeah,
You
now
know?
watching him make that stuff, I was just like, okay, how do I get into this, and how do I make enough money that I can have a power hammer someday?
Oh, agreed. One of those freaking power hammers would be so nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, I guess I should preface this, like, while we're talking about this stuff, that my style of blacksmithing is more primitive than you know most things that you're going to see on YouTube and stuff like that. It's I run a coal forge. I do everything by hand. I file everything. I have an angle grinder, obviously, but you know I have no equipment to speak of compared to these guys that you see on YouTube. So anything that people hear like on this podcast is take it with a grain of salt. It's going back about 200, 300 years, but it still works, and that's sort
That's
of the point of it.
that's the way to be, man. You
Yeah,
don't have any sort of external uh, crutches, you know. Everything you do is raw.
yeah, absolutely. That's sort of the cool thing about it is like it doesn't come out perfect, but it's always unique, and people are going to remember it, and that's the cool thing to me.
I love blacksmithing. It's probably my favorite of the like the trades that I've gotten into because I've done a couple at
Mm-hmm.
this point, and blacksmithing it's not like anything else, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, you come from like the trades a little bit more than I do, I think, right? Like you started out construction and heavy machinery, and you're learning welding now and all that kind of stuff.
I hope to learn welding. I mean, that's my next step. I gotta get a welder, but I don't have any money for that right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's always the big hurdle. It's like my my two younger brothers are also in this company with me, and one of them trained as an electrician, the other one was in the army, and both of them learned how to weld at pretty young ages. Whereas I decided to do the dumbass thing and go to college and learn about books, like literally books. I learned about English literature,
Hey,
and
a fellow
right,
nerd. I went to
yeah,
college
yeah,
briefly. I went to college and I took a English major in a education minor because I was thinking I'd be an English teacher, but I
yeah,
dropped out. Back to the point you're making about me being in trades. I dropped out after like I think I lasted a year and a half, so
yeah.
3 semesters. And I don't know. I was sitting there in a classroom looking around thinking, if I finish this degree, I'm gonna end up back here sitting in the classroom, and it just seemed like a no-win situation.
Yep.
And I dropped out and I went straight into the trades. I started off as a commercial painter. I was just
Mm-hmm.
painting walls, and then I worked my way up. I was a contract carpenter a bit. I did some framing. I built a couple houses, and I ended up finally like at the peak before I got injured. I was a contract stonemason, and
Oh, nice.
that was the funnest. I really enjoyed that a lot. It's
Yeah.
like
No, I
Lego.
believe it. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That definitely is. It's like Minecraft in real life or whatever.
Oh,
You can
absolutely.
you build the coolest shit just out of stone. That's cool. Like I wish you're a little bit younger than me. I think you said you're like 29.
Yes,
I'm like I'm
I turned
32.
29 4 days ago.
Hey, happy birthday, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm 32, and you know, I fell for that whole line that you should follow your passion no matter where it takes you. So I got my English degree, got my bachelor's, and then I decided I was going to go to law school. Dropped out of law school because it was like training you how to lie, and I'm not cool with that. Um,
Yeah, the
and I
sickness.
went back and I got a master's degree in English literature.
Holy
And I
crap.
was actually, yeah, I was actually on the way to do the PhD, and I looked at it. I'm like, wait, I've got another 4 to 6 years left on this shit, and I have no job prospects. So I was like, nah, that's not going to happen. Um, so I went back. I got my master's degree and spent about 5 years as a technical writer, um, and now I manage operations for a service company that does security. So
Ooh,
you never know where it's gonna end up, but it always ends up somewhere.
I guess. I mean, that's kind of what they say about getting a master's in English.
It's useless, yeah.
But it's
But
not
I can
useless.
I can quote Shakespeare with the best.
Absolutely, man. It's admirable. Not a lot of people are like that.
Yeah, I mean, so it's cool to have learned about it, but now that I look back at it, it's like, hey, um, I could have learned how to quote Shakespeare without paying $60,000 for it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
now I'm this guy that I work with my hands when I go out in the field with the guys. I have to use my brain to do a lot of stuff, but it's nothing I was trained to do. Even when I was a technical writer, never really learned about any of that stuff. So you know, it's better, I think, to learn it on your own, and then to the point of the podcast here, get back and do something with your hands so that you're more connected with things, that you want to do, that actually means something in the real world, which is kind of cool. But books are certainly important. Don't get me wrong on that. But um, I wish I would have dropped out at 3 months or 6 months or something like that and just gotten into the trades.
Yeah, I never regret it. Although I say that I never regretted it, but you know, the odds are probably 100% that if I'd stayed in college, I wouldn't have ended up falling off a roof. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right?
yeah, fucking hindsight.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah.
back to blacksmithing. We got
Absolutely.
a little bit of a list of things we want to cover here. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get
you're
into it.
saying let's start with the history of blacksmithing.
Yeah.
Not,
I mean, it's such a cool history to get into. So, I mean, a lot of people say it's the oldest profession, prostitution, obviously. And you got the fisherman to pay the prostitute, and you got the blacksmith to make the hooks.
yeah,
Um, so it's one of the oldest things that people learned how to do once they learned how metal was an actual commodity to be used and made into productive items. So I'm going to reference a lot of the time with the history stuff here. M.T. Richardson's book, um, Practical Blacksmithing. If you haven't read that, I recommend it. It's pretty good. It's
what's
a
his name again?
compendium. M.T. Richardson.
M.T. Richardson.
Yeah, he's so this is a compendium of 4 different volumes, I believe, either that or 3 different volumes from the late 1800s. This guy put together chronicling the different aspects of blacksmithing, metalworking in general. He goes through everything that you could think of, from straightening sheet metal to how to make a pair of pliers, all the way up to how anvils were made in the day. And
Wow.
yeah, he really covers a lot of material. And the copy I have here, I don't think it's the one that's available on Amazon, but it says right on the front over 1,000 illustrations, and they're not lying on that. So if you go through, it's just like everything you can imagine, like how to make hardy tools, how to mount your anvil to the block correctly, how to build a forge, all these kind of things. So he goes through the history, and he starts back at the Stone Age. And this was when, I mean, not necessarily the actual Stone Age, but like right after the Stone Age, when people were getting into like forging bronze, um, you know, forging tin, all these kind of things that they could use a rock for because it's pretty soft stuff. Um,
I
so
found that
he,
I found that book on Thrift Books. It's
yeah,
$41. Although that's a new copy, but
that's
there are no other options.
that's pretty expensive, man. Because I actually I got this used from Amazon for like $15, I think, maybe 18, something like that.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's not a winner by any means.
well, you know what? I'm looking. I have Amazon pulled up here right now to this page, and they have the hardcover from $6. So maybe I'll
Wow.
maybe I'll send you a copy your way.
I mean,
Um,
that's funny that Thrift Books is more expensive than Amazon. That's
I mean,
good to check.
it it's a very niche book. It's not something that a lot of people would have had, especially the full compiled version of it.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, sorry for distracting you. That was a
no, no,
tangent.
no,
Uh,
no, you're good. It's so he starts out the first chapter's on hammers and the history of hammers, and he goes from using just a rock to pound on some metal that they pulled out of the ground and were able to smelt with the earliest technology, and moves on through the evolution of the hammer through a rock with a stick that's shoved through it, to a rock with sticks tied around it, and then all the way up through to where we are today, or the 1800s when he wrote this, which is basically the same thing.
yeah.
And he just goes through and explains every aspect of the hammer, and then moves on to anvils. And so when we go through all these different things with the history of blacksmithing, it's like people started out with rocks, and you could do it with a rock if you wanted to. The biggest thing that was driven into my head when I was reading through the forums and watching YouTube videos that weren't high quality stuff like what Alex Steele does, is that you could do this like people in sub-Saharan Africa still do today, with 2 rocks and a piece of metal. It's not efficient, but it works. So people could start pretty easily, and they can make really useful things without having to put a whole lot of money in it, which is kind of nice to know, because our people have been doing it for 5,000-10,000 years. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's a little bit similar to like growing seedlings. There's a
Oh yeah.
thousand different ways to do it.
Hmm.
But
Absolutely. And that's I really enjoy the stuff you were talking about with Alex Utopium,
yeah,
about all the gardening stuff. I really want to get into that. I have no land, but actually I think I have a little bit to talk about on that a little bit later with tools for blacksmithing and how they relate to gardening, because I actually just made a trowel for one of my buddies who's got some raised garden beds going on. So
that's actually one of the only things so far that I've made functional blacksmithing.
yeah,
I turned a shovel into like sort of a, what an adze is?
yeah, yeah,
I just basically bent the damn shovel so that you can use it like a hoe.
yep,
And it worked really, really well. It was perfect for digging this trench I was making to put in some weeping tile.
yep.
And so that was me blacksmithing a while back.
No, I mean it's the old blacksmithing saying is need a tool, make a tool. So if you have something and you can turn it into something else, why the hell not? Um, but yeah, I had my buddy over here. He was helping me make a hammer, and he's like, "Hey, can we make some gardening tools?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" So we took this piece of I think it was 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch material, and just like we cut it into three different pieces. We made a little. I'm not even sure what it's actually called. It's like digs up the weed roots, um, and we made a trowel. Made a little hand hoe, and he's going to be using that this spring to get his garden really going. So I'm stoked about that.
That's the thing about blacksmithing. It's probably the best self-reliance sort of thing to learn.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's basically make the things that make all the other things.
Yeah,
So that's why I started the way that I did is like, okay, I'm going to start making nails. I'm going to make a hammer, and then I'm going to be able to put 2 pieces of wood together with 2 pieces of material that I actually forged into tools that I can use to do that. You
that's
know,
awesome. And then next level, you cut down a tree and you make the boards.
yeah. No, it's like I once told my buddies back in college as a complete joke, that one day I hope that we could have a banquet where I've made the beer, I've slaughtered the animal, I've grown the food, I've made the table, and I've made the silverware, and
That's that's ideal.
that would be badass, man.
So badass. That's the dream. And it's funny how many people in our little weird circle of anarchy Twitter are a lot
Hmm.
like this. Like in real life, I don't think I've met more than one other person that feels this way. But
Yeah.
here we are, and there's more like us.
Oh yeah. No, it's I joined Twitter back in 2016. During the whole first Trump election or whatever, just for the shits and giggles of it, and to sort of stir up some trouble among the statists that were around, and just going crazy about the Trump versus Hillary thing. And what I found was a lot cooler than that. It was a lot of people like yourself, like uh, MRJ Smith,
Yeah, he's quality.
Alex Utopium, all these guys who are really into doing stuff for themselves. And to be honest, I was an anarcho-capitalist back then. I consider myself just a straight up anarchist at this point, and I don't bother with any labels on it. But I didn't even know about agorism back then, and just reading people on Twitter, I'm just like, oh, that makes complete sense. So why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah,
And that gets it into like just being able to talk to these people is it's eye opening, because there aren't really that many people around. Like I've got my one buddy who's into gardening. I've got one guy who is way into like silver collecting. I've got my one gun buddy, but none of them all sort of coalesce into one guy. So it's kind of cool to be in a community sort of like that.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. Twitter's what you make it, you know. It's
Oh yeah.
a lot better than Facebook, I've found.
Yeah, you could, if you wanted to, you could go into the deepest, darkest depths of depravity, um, or you can find just wholesome content like people making bottle openers.
Absolutely. That was a wicked bottle opener.
Well, I'm sitting here. I just cracked open a beer here with the first bottle opener I ever made. It looks like shit, but it opens bottles.
Well, here, I will pour a drink and we can cheers to blacksmithing.
Absolutely, man.
And we'll get back to the history of the black metal. I mean, when I thought we were talking about blacksmithing, I thought we'd have to start at the beginning of ironworking, you know, because that's where
Yeah, yeah,
blacksmithing gets its name. Because
yep,
before that, the tin and the copper, you know, it's not blacksmithing, it's
yep.
yellowsmithing or silversmithing.
Right, right.
But it's a
Yeah,
good point that back in the day, that is how it began. You know, two people with a rock, they put a
yep,
bunch of, I don't know. I guess they would have had a rock sit next to the fire that melted some copper out, and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting." Repeat.
yep.
They get enough of it, and then they make something out of it.
Yeah, no, I start there and then I sort of got off track, but if you look back at the history of the actual working of iron, it started off very similar to the way that copper and tinsmithing and silversmithing and all that kind of stuff started out. It's just something hard being hit with something else hard with a soft metal between it. So obviously iron is not super soft in its natural state. So you have to get it hot and you have to hit it and put it into whatever shape that you want. So my understanding of some of the more primitive versions of an actual blacksmith is going to be, your early Mastermere finds. So the Mastermere find is a Viking find that they discovered a bunch of different like anvils and tools on a Viking era corpse that was found in a bog, I believe. And this guy had tiny little anvils that probably weighed about 2 pounds on him, and they would have been mounted into a stump.
Yeah, I've seen
And
those. The spike anvil.
yeah, yeah, they're so cool, right? So
So cool.
it's I've actually seen a guy make one of those, and it's incredible how he did it. Um, and it's incredible that they were able to do it back then. But it's basically, you take a hunk of iron, put it in something heavy so that it doesn't move around, and you can pretty much make whatever you need to. Horseshoes, nails, and all that kind of stuff. And you've got a traveling blacksmith kit. And that's really just how they started out, and progressed from there up to our modern London pattern anvil, which is what everybody thinks of when they think of an anvil. It's the one that hits the roadrunner on the head, or
Yeah,
the coyote on the head.
it's got the
Um,
horn and the hardy hole, and
yeah, it's an iconic shape that everybody understands. But that's a relatively new development in blacksmithing. It's mid 1800s is when the London pattern anvil was really popular. It was developed earlier than that, obviously, but then you've got the German pattern anvil. Um, you've got, I believe, some Scandinavian versions that are a little bit different. Most of the mainland European ones have two horns instead of one. Um, you know, the hardy hole is mounted to the front on a lot of the German ones instead of on the back. Minor differences, but they all seem to have the same features to make it easier, and that's the evolution that we saw from just a lump of metal that was hammered down into a stump up to where we are today, and it hasn't really progressed that much, since the late 1800s.
well, I mean, apart from the power hammer, right?
Well, yeah, of course.
Although they had power hammers back then, right? They
Yeah,
just
yeah,
used
they were
the
driven
water
by
mill.
steam.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and steam.
steam and water.
Anyway, cheers to the blacksmithing.
Absolutely. Cheers. But yeah, it's I think the last thing that I read about the development of the London pattern anvil that we saw here in the U.S. at least was the cast steel anvil, and those were developed I think in the early 1900s and sort of fizzled out around the 1940s, and those were obviously cast from steel, and they don't ring like a cast iron anvil with a steel welded top.
Yeah.
Um, they're good, and a lot of people like them a lot, and they have good rebound. But there's just something about an old anvil that rings that everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's what you have to have. You know?
Um, I don't know if mine is cast steel or if it's just literally a chunk of lead because it's pretty crappy. I bought it from up here. We have a store called Princess Auto, which I think down south is called Harbor Freight.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just a cheap little 50-pounder.
No, that's sort of where I started, man. It's you know, when I first got started on blacksmithing, I was on the forums and looking at how people were starting out, and it's you start out one of two ways, and I started out both. You either mount a sledgehammer into a stump and use that as your anvil.
That was the first step for me. I had one of those.
Yep, yep. And then the next step is you buy a Harbor Freight or a Princess Auto anvil, and they're not good, but they get the job done. You know, it's I had a 15 pound, to be honest with you. That's what I was really starting out with my hooks on, and it was awful, but it works.
Making fishing
It
hooks?
doesn't rebound. No, I was making hooks to hang like coats and stuff on.
All right, yeah. I'm halfway through a project where I'm making two of those for my grandma.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
she's
know, people love that stuff, man. They're like most of the things that I've made have gone to family and friends because they see it and they're just like, I could use that, and they appreciate it. Is the big thing. It's handmade. It's heartfelt. It's something you spend a lot of time on.
and it's unique.
Yeah, there's nothing else like it. Absolutely.
It's a damn shame that it fizzled out in the 40s.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of getting picked up now, and you know, as much as I like to shit on on people who are obsessed with Forge and Fire, and if if you're one of them, I'm sorry.
I don't have
But
cable, so I don't really know what you're talking
all right,
about.
good, good. So yeah, Forged and Fire is a reality show about making knives. It's basically uh, a cooking show that they took and scaled out to like 4 hours long um, for the time period that people can use, not the actual show itself. But you know, they give people random ingredients, car springs, that kind of thing, and they have to make a knife out of it. And people have gotten way into it. Like the first thing anybody says to me who watches this show is just when they find out I'm blacksmithing, they're like, "Hey, do you watch Forged in Fire, and are you going to go on it?" And I'm like, "No." But that's sort of beside the point. It's I shit on the people that like that show a lot, but it has rekindled people's interest in the craft, which is kind of nice. Um, so there's some people like there's a website, it's called iforgeiron.com. Um, the guys on there are usually pretty old school and they hate people who watch this show. But there's some guys that are on there that are catering to that crowd and sort of making new anvils, making new swedge blocks, making new post vices, this kind of stuff. And they're doing it because of the popularity, because the market has made it profitable to do it. And that's what's driven anvil prices through the roof, which is unfortunate for people like ourselves who want to do it for the love of it instead of for the fad.
It
But
is
you know,
utterly unbelievable how much a
oh my god,
fucking good anvil costs. I found a pretty good source. There's a guy in Edmonton, which is only an hour and a half for me, and he's selling 100-pound anvils with just beautiful steel welded plate face. It's like you bounce a ball bearing off it like 3 feet. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
But it's goddamn $500 or something.
Oh my god, that's actually cheap.
Well, it is if you're working.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's not cheap, but it's cheap in relation to what you're looking at for a
Yeah.
new anvil from like Germany. Um, I actually just pulled this up. So Petting House is a German company. They make a lot of their anvils in Belgium, actually, but they have a 275-pound anvil you can buy for new at $2,300 US.
Without shipping.
Yeah, and it's $1 per pound to ship. So the anvil prices have gone through the roof. I'm hoping they're gonna sort of level out because I love my anvil. Don't get me wrong, but it's old and it's had a good life and it needs to be retired and made into just like a piece in the side of my shop.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's like the new ones are just so crazy expensive. But the good thing about this Forged in Fire craze is that it's been people are now sort of innovating, and there's a couple of companies out there that are making new anvils now out of like H13 steel, which is unheard of. It's a heat resistant, shock resistant steel that is it's much better than anything you're going to find from the 40s or before. It's just not
Yeah.
antique, so people don't think it's good. Um,
Futuristic.
yeah, it's super futuristic because I don't know if you've ever tried to forge H13, but it's almost impossible with a normal setup. You have to almost have a power hammer to actually work it.
Just
Um,
way too strong, huh?
yeah, yeah. It's and the thing about it, since it's the H stands for heat resistant, so you get it up to a normal forging temperature of like 1700 degrees to 2300 degrees, and it feels like you're hitting on a mild steel rod when it's at room temperature. Um, it's a ridiculous steel. But they're casting anvils out of this stuff and they're heat treating it perfectly to bring it to 60 Rockwell. And it's just really good stuff.
And it'll
And the guy
last
that's
an
making it,
eternity.
absolutely it will. And the guy that is making these things is not charging you an arm and a leg for what you're getting. I think I can't remember his name, but he's making these anvils at his machine shop or his foundry that he has out in Ohio, and he's charging probably $1,000 less than like a petting house is. And petting house is still doing 10-15 steel, I think, that they're casting these things out of.
Yeah.
Um, so you got H13 costs probably twice as much to actually acquire. It's pretty insane that he's able to do that, and he's doing it because the market is so good, bringing these people in who want to do it that'll pay him a premium price, but a lot less than the premium that these established brands are trying to get.
It goes to show you how much they mark that shit up.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Absolutely.
it's amazing.
Because
Um,
looking at the price of steel, it's not that expensive. For 10-15, it's really not a super expensive steel. So why is a 275-pound anvil $2,100? It's a good anvil, but they're not doing anything special. They're not making any magic anvils out of it. So, they're riding on their name and on the craze.
and
So,
also, it's like if somebody needs an anvil, there's
hmm
only so many things they can do about that. You know,
oh
they
yeah,
kind of have
yeah,
you bent over the barrel.
yep, they absolutely do. But the technology is not super progressing or anything like that, but it's progressing a little bit now that people are more interested in it, which I think is actually a good thing.
Absolutely. The more people that like it, the better, right?
Yeah.
Uh, although I bet you we still don't have as many people that are blacksmithing as they used to have in the 1800s.
Oh no. So like, to underscore that point, my anvil came from my dad's cousin's barn, and this man owns a farm that his great 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 grandfather bought. When he first immigrated here from Germany. And I live in Pennsylvania, so there's a lot of Germans here. But he had this anvil sitting in his garage or in his barn for generations, and it's got such a huge dip right in the middle of it that you could tell how much it's been used over the years. And you never see anybody banging on anything anymore out in their out in their barn or out in their garage, except for people like us.
Yeah.
So obviously this guy had one, and if you look at the catalogs from back then, they were selling them like hotcakes. Uh, People had to use it to get by, which is a big thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, part of your plow would break, and either
Hmm.
you'd go in town on a horse and get it fixed, or you'd fix it on the farm.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, most of my relatives before the last generation were farmers, and they all know how to fix stuff. And almost all of them remember having an anvil on the property so that they could shoe their horses and so they could fix their equipment. And if you couldn't do that, then you were out of harvest basically, because you couldn't bring the wheat in, you couldn't bring the corn in, you couldn't do any of that stuff. So you have to have that skill or you're going to starve.
Yeah. I mean, it was the only way to keep going. You have to
Hmm.
be able to keep your stuff functional.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Uh, my goal is pretty much to do that, so that once I do get my little agricultural paradise going, then I can
Hmm.
be pretty self-reliant, be able to make the implements that I need.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This sort of came up twice in the past year for me. Like I was doing this as a hobby, and my dad had just built his house, and he needed some hooks out in the garage. So I took some rebar and made him some hooks so he can hang his extension cords up, which is nothing huge, but you need to be able to do it. And then I was out at the forge the one day, and I'm like, I'm getting my hands all dirty, getting this coal put into my forge. I need to make a shovel, so I made a shovel. So if you have the ability to do these things, then you don't have to go out to I would have to run 20 minutes into town to be able to buy a tiny shovel to shovel coal.
And it'd be
Whereas
worse.
oh yeah, it would absolutely be worse. It would probably break the next day, but
Yeah,
I can take a piece of angle iron and I can make a shovel out of it, and it'll last me for years. So why not learn that skill? Take that 30 minutes to make it, and be good to go.
that's kind of like the secondary aspect of this, is that the quality of the things that you can buy nowadays has just gone so far down
Hmm.
that it makes more and more sense to start doing it yourself, because the stuff that you can make, even if you are just a crappy amateur, it's gonna be better quality than the shit that you buy.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because most things are stamped out of sheet metal. And if you ever used it, I mean, you have obviously, but if you use a shovel that's made out of stamped sheet metal and you try and pry a rock out of the ground with it, it'll probably bend on you if it's not a good quality shovel.
Oh,
And a
it's
good quality
insane.
shovel costs a shit ton of money.
It's just
um,
it's just a little plate of steel with two little spot welds onto the handle, and then you go to mix some concrete, and it just breaks right off the handle.
yep, yep. We
It's
actually ran into that. My brother was pouring a concrete pad. If you have a shovel that's got some rivets through it, you're probably going to be all right.
it's pretty crazy how crappy everything is.
It is. Um, but hopefully the market will take care of that eventually too. But we'll see. If not, people like us are here to make stuff that'll work.
Absolutely, it gives us an opportunity.
Yeah.
But the problem is most people don't even see it. The only reason the market is how it is because most people have kind of they've got their eyes closed so hard that they can't tell that these things they're buying are junk.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of the people have never used a shovel or swung a sledgehammer or,
It's a good point.
you know, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I grew up having to do that kind of stuff. But I know that there's several of my friends that I've had to teach how to use a power drill. Like, how do you get through life not knowing how to use this? But they do, and they're like, I'll call a guy. Like,
Yeah,
why don't you just learn how to do it? It's not that hard.
I'll call a guy.
Yeah, that drove me insane. So right after college, I was living with actually my college roommate. We moved in together, and he had to put together some flat pack furniture from IKEA. And he had a power drill that his grandmother had gotten him for a graduation present from high school, and he had no idea how to use it. And he pulled this thing off the top of the fridge after I had moved in, and it was covered in dust. Opened it up, and had never been used, never been charged, anything like that. He's like, "Why isn't this thing working?" I'm like, "Well, it's not charged, dude." So we plugged it in, and we put together this flat pack furniture. And I'm just like, "That really wasn't that hard, was it?" And he's like, "No, I kind of wish they would have taught me how to do that when I was a kid." I'm like, "This guy's dad was a NASA engineer. Like, how does that even happen?"
Wow.
I don't get it. Uh, but I'm a boomer at heart that way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why they call us Zoomers, right?
Well, yeah. Actually, you know what? Uh, I think I remember you were talking with the Free Reprimand about the generation distinction,
Yeah,
and I am actually the very tail end of what they call the millennial generation, right?
me
Like
too.
I'm like 1987. That's like right as it became a thing, and I sort of get it. Like we always have the four generation structure or whatever, but I look around at all of the millennials that I know and who I grew up with, and I'm just like, you guys really, you're not the same as I am,
Yeah,
and I'm not sure how they make the distinction. Like I think you were making that point before that it makes no sense that that's how it's laid out, but that's that's how it actually is, which is it's crazy to me.
I mean, my argument with Skip there was that I don't think that we are actually what people are going to call millennials. I understand that now
Yeah, yeah,
we have the name, but in the future, I think that they're going to call millennials kids that were born after like the year 2000, you know,
sure, yeah,
that had a
yeah. I think
Facebook page as babies.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I
because
think right now what they're calling the distinction is that it's you were coming of age during the millennium or something like that. You were growing up during it,
yeah,
which makes I mean that's such a bullshit distinction. But you know,
I
I'm
don't know.
not sure how they're going to remember us, but it's going to be so. Skip made the point about the greatest generation. I think
Yeah,
that it's sort of a non-defined generation because my grandfather was part of the quote unquote uh, greatest generation. He was born in 1925, but if a guy had fought in World War II and was born in the late 1800s, he was probably considered the greatest generation. So where do they draw that line? Because there were no generational distinctions, prior to the boomer generation, I don't think. But I'm not an expert on that either. So
well, I mean, that's like everything, history is written after the fact. So while we're living
yeah,
through it, we just kind of got to speculate.
yeah, and we have all the generational wars on Twitter, and
Yeah.
people making all the terrible memes from the boomer generation, and some of the Gen Xers from the earlier part are not very good at it either, and then some of them are really good.
I love memes. Memes
But, oh yeah,
absolutely make me happy.
they're one of my favorite parts of Twitter, to be honest with you.
For sure. It's that saying where it's like a picture tells 1,000 words.
Hmm.
If you throw a couple words on that picture, it's a whole different thing.
Oh yeah. So the coolest thing to me about memes is that they can they can transmit a meaning that only certain people get, but it's the smart people that get it. So it's when you look at things like Pete Raymond's memes and Adam Dongcopter, his memes,
Yeah.
a lot of them are full of a lot of references that you have to have inside knowledge on certain topics, and that I think that makes them more interesting. But then there's also the really stupid memes that piss people off that are really funny. So I want those too.
It's a pretty crazy time we're living in.
It is, and it's a lot of fun, but it's also very doomerish, as they say
Hmm.
on the memes.
Yeah. I've been
Um,
called a doomer. I was really offended.
were you? Because I took one of those online meme sort of tests, and I was considered a doomer zoomer, and I'm okay with it.
I don't know. I'm not a doomer. Fuck that. I think I have a lot of hope.
Yeah.
I
No, it's
mean, I rage against all of the bad things, but that doesn't mean that I don't also think that we're the most futuristic generation that's ever existed.
oh yeah, absolutely. It's so like you and I are talking over the internet right now. How could anybody else transmit this kind of information at any other point in history? It's not possible.
Not to mention
Um,
we're having a face-to-face conversation of sorts from
yeah, yeah,
fucking like 2,000 miles away or something
yeah,
in
absolutely.
two
It's
different
a very
countries.
yep, two different countries completely crossing boundaries. It's awesome, and then we look around and it's like, oh, everything's terrible, but it's really not that terrible. Like there's a lot of people who look around and they pay attention to what the media is saying, and it's just everything is going to be the death of us. We're all going to die tomorrow. People have been through this kind of shit before. It's why worry about it?
Yeah, I mean, just try to make yourself untouchable, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and that's sort of the point of blacksmithing, homesteading,
Agorism.
gardening, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
That's kind
agorism,
of
absolutely.
the whole aim of agorism.
Hmm. It's become ungovernable, become untouchable, become a person that is just a person instead of a collective, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, make the state irrelevant.
Yeah, starve it out.
Yeah, bleed it dry.
Well, you want to move on to the next point on the list here, the tools and whatnot.
Sure, we've kind of started to address the anvil question because I mean that
Yeah.
is a pretty good first thing that you're gonna need
Hmm.
because like when I was starting out, before I even had that sledgehammer and a stump, I was just hitting a railroad tie on a rock, and
Yep.
believe me, that was no fun.
No.
Um,
No, I actually. So I think I had a post on this a couple of months ago for a guy that was asking about how to get started in blacksmithing, and a lot of people use these fabricated anvils out of railroad ties, and they charge an obscene amount of money for them on the internet, which is just insane to me, and people pay it.
and
But
they set them up wrong.
yeah, that was the point that I was making in this post is like if you're gonna set it up on end.
Yeah,
It's kind
keep
of tough to
the
get.
keep the steel under the hit.
Yes, exactly. It's tough to get across on audio, but stand it up on end as if the train was going up into the sky,
Yeah,
and
upright.
mount that into a stump, and then you have so much more mass below your hits, which is great. So if you absolutely have to start that way, I mean I actually own one of these things. I've used it once or twice maybe for smithing, but I went to an antique store and I found one they were selling for $10 as like a paperweight, and I ground it down. I put a little tiny horn on it. I'm probably going to give that to a guy who wants to start into blacksmithing, but he has no money, um, and he wants to get into it. Um, and you go down there, you find a $10 piece of junk, and you can make something really useful out of it. So as far as anvils go, you can go anywhere from that railroad tie sort of thing up to a pending house anvil if you want.
Yeah, yeah, or those what you're describing, those futuristic 1310 or whatever
Yeah.
these things.
Yep, those are really cool. I will buy one of those once I retire, probably.
Yeah,
But other pieces of equipment to get started. There's a few things that make it a little bit easier. I've found at least. One is a post vise. Uh, these things are insanely useful for bending iron and for clamping things down to upset, that kind of thing. For those who don't know, upsetting is making things thicker rather than thinner.
yeah,
Um, so being able to clamp something down and hammer on it, a post vise has a leg that goes all the way down to the ground so that it can absorb that energy without having to actually take it into the body of the vise itself. Um, so like if you were trying to hammer on a machinist's vise, there's a chance that you're going to snap something off.
yeah. Just
Um,
bust it right off the table.
yeah, exactly. And I know MRJ Smith is using a concoction of a machinist vise that he's mounting into an anvil, sort of as a makeshift post vise, and that works out actually pretty well in that situation. But a lot of people, when they start out with blacksmithing, are thinking, I have this vise sitting on my bench. I could just clamp some hot metal in there and bang on it. You might break your vise, so you got to be sort of careful. But a post vise can be very expensive. They're making them new again. They're about $650 US. Um, I got mine for about $150 in combination with a machinist vise. So Craigslist is a great place to go for those kind of things if you're trying to find a post vise, um, and they're
You're in a
very very useful.
you're in a pretty good location for that kind of thing, though.
Oh, absolutely. Pennsylvania Dutch country.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can find almost anything like that pretty easily. But I think the range across the U.S. at least, from what I've seen, has been from like $350 in like California to the 150 buck range here on the East Coast.
I could never find that shit in Canada. I'd have to, I don't know. I'd have to go to the east, kind of just north of where you are, right? But
I
even then, there's probably like one ad, and there's going to be a
yeah,
hundred people after it.
yeah. No, I mean, I sort of feel for you there, but I'm kind of surprised being out where you are that they don't have more of them available. Because
It's
these things
just
were made by everybody back then.
it's a numbers thing, right? There
Yeah,
weren't that many people up here,
yeah,
and
that's true. That's true.
also the frickin' wild overgrows things so fast
Hmm.
out in the bush. I bet you most of them are lost, right?
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, I would think every mining camp would have had one. Every homesteader probably would have had one at one point. But to your point, there probably weren't that many people out there doing the homesteading thing. um, and even around here, it's actually getting tougher to find them. They're winding up in scrap yards a lot of the time. I've actually, in the course of my business, I have to take a lot of scrap steel over to the scrap yard, and I see things there that I wish that I could rescue, but they won't sell to the public.
Isn't that just the biggest kick in the pants?
Right? It's
It
terrible.
it literally makes me furious that they
Mhm.
only take things in and you're not allowed to take things out, even if you pay them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because if they would let me, I would pay them almost market value for it, but they won't. They're under contract with somebody who's just going to buy this and like rip it up into nothing, which
Yeah,
it's a tragedy.
it
But
really is. Our society desperately needs an adjustment in that area.
yeah, the disposable commodity thing is just probably the worst thing that came out of the post World War II era. That you could just throw things away and buy another one. Um,
And it's enforced now. You can't
oh
go and
yeah,
keep things
yeah,
now.
right, exactly. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about it, and it makes me almost weep when I see something like a post vice or something in the scrapyard because I can't get it out.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
It's a damn shame. I was before I got my anvil back, I was looking for an anvil shaped object or even just a piece of steel
Hmm.
to hit on. And I found that exact problem. I It blew my mind when I learned that the scrapyards wouldn't let me take anything.
Yeah. Because there's a few of them out there in every area. You have to look really hard for them that are willing to be like an independent scrap dealer. But there's very few because a lot of the large companies are contracting with them to get their recycled materials, which is mandated by some laws in some places, and they have to make a certain percentage out of recycled material, so they have to take in a certain amount of recycled material to recycle, obviously. So it's reinforcing the problem by trying to do the right thing, but doing the right thing for the wrong reason. So
Isn't it
I don't
hilarious?
know. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm hoping things will change that way, but I really don't think they will. So we got to sort of uh, rescue things if it's possible to do.
I mean, that's kind of where agorism comes in, you know. Hopefully in the
Yeah.
future there'll be much more functional online markets where you can just find these things before people put them in the scrapyard.
Yeah. Um, I actually have sort of a bead on one that I'm trying to save that's sitting in a guy's basement about 2 miles from where I'm sitting. Um, he's got a 150-pound anvil that was given to him, and he's probably 90 years old, so he's not going to last a whole lot longer. Um, and I want to try and trade him, a couple of ounces of silver to try and get this thing from him because he sees that intrinsic value. Um, we'll see where that goes. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to actually, you know, make him take that as a good offer. We'll see.
That's awesome. You're gonna use silver to trade them for an anvil. That's like straight out of the
Yeah,
1800s.
yeah. I sort of got into that way back in the day. Like you had mentioned Jack Spirko, the survival podcast guy, on that episode with Skip. and I started listening to him in 2008 when he started the podcast, and that sort of got me turned on to the prepper thing. And I'm a terrible prepper, but I'm trying. But one thing I am good at is holding silver. So I try and do a lot of the business that I do in silver if I can.
That's awesome. Um, I'm looking to get into. I've been watching some of these YouTube videos of this guy that goes to like the dump, and he liberates old motors and anything with copper in it,
Hmm.
copper or aluminum, and he
Hmm.
smelts it into bars. And I mean, copper and aluminum aren't as valuable as silver and gold, but they're so much easier to source.
Yep.
And it just I get the dollar signs going on behind my eyes when I look at the piles of ingots that he's making.
Yep. Absolutely. That's that's actually an ancillary form of income for the company that I have is we scrap a lot of aluminum, and we don't melt it down, but if I could, I would, because that's a lot of that's really cool. But we sell it off to scrap companies, and it brings in an extra $1,300 a year or something like that. Pays for the Christmas party, so why not?
Why not? It
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense just
that's just
to
aluminum. I mean, that the copper value is, I mean, it's undervalued now, but it's totally worth having bars of copper just sit around because it's a useful metal.
oh, absolutely. Like Ranger Monk was saying on Twitter, he thinks that we should get back into making copper doorknobs and copper light switches and things that people touch because it's naturally antibacterial, and that's
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
clever.
Yeah, absolutely. The same with silver. Like obviously you can't make silver doorknobs, but you know a lot of these metals have intrinsic values that are not monetary, which is a really cool thing about them. Like everybody's always harping on gold, and I love gold, but silver is antibacterial, so is copper. They all have things that you can do with them that have nothing to do with the actual monetary value, which is why they actually have value.
Yeah, because they're special.
Absolutely.
Um, uh, Back to getting started tools. We've went over
Yeah.
anvils and post vices,
Yeah.
um, but I think a good thing to mention is that that's kind of like next level. Just a really early, just without any of these things. I think what you need is some vice grips
Hmm.
and and a hammer. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you really want to get started, blacksmithing without any specialized tools, absolutely. Like a pair of vice grips will replace tongs. Um, no
Kind
problem
of.
there whatsoever. Well, yeah, I mean, it's
They're a little frustrating because they won't let go.
they won't let go, and sometimes they actually deform what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But they work. So whatever works, you can do. So like you were saying, anvil-shaped objects. Um, you can buy a piece of 3-inch round steel from just a steel supplier online, like onlinemetals.com. Um, and it's A2 steel. It's not hard, but it's probably the same quality as something like a Harbor Freight anvil if you want to use it for that. So you can buy that for $80 versus spending $1,500 on a new anvil. If you can't find a used one around you, why not do that? Use your vice
Absolutely.
grips. Use You can even use a claw hammer to get started. Just careful of the rebound if you do have an anvil because it might take your eye out. But
Yeah, take you right in the head.
or exactly, yeah. Um, but yeah, you could use all these simple tools to do pretty much anything that a blacksmith does with specialized tools. So I mean, I usually do try to encourage everybody that I see on Twitter who's trying to get into blacksmithing to just try it with the cheapest stuff that they can to see if they like it, see if it's worth the investment to get more specialized tools.
Yeah.
Um,
Rather
so yeah,
than spending $500 to find out, oh, it's actually a lot of work.
yeah, absolutely. Because if I would have started out by spending $500 on an anvil and just been like, never mind, that would not have worked out well for me. Um, but yeah, you can start out with all those simple tools. and pair of vice grips, little piece of steel, uh, machinist vice, because most people do have those just like sitting around in a garage. Um,
And a
all
campfire.
that'll work. Yeah, yeah. And that's something that I sort of did want to talk about is the forge aspect of it, because forges look like they're so expensive, but they're not if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I know you were into the propane thing, and you can do that pretty cheaply, I think, if you build it yourself. You can speak more to that than I can, but um,
I mean, if I had
what?
built it myself, it would have been a lot cheaper. But I ordered a kit from uh,
Oh yeah, yeah.
from Alex Steele's friend Sam Fowler, way back in the day.
Hmm. Yep.
I uh, I spent some of my injury money on that.
Okay.
Um, that was a long time ago. That was 2016, and
Yeah.
then I just had all these components laying around. But if I had assembled it all myself from scratch, shoot, it would have been so cheap.
Yeah. I believe it because it's. I've actually seen some guys make a propane forge out of a single fire brick.
Yeah,
Um, it's pretty impressive what they're able to do.
just with a map
Um,
torch.
yep. But in my case, I didn't want to go the propane route, so I went the charcoal and the coal route. And people can do that too. Uh, I mean, I started with actually, I'm still working with it. It's just a box of dirt forge is what they call it. So I built a box, I filled it with dirt, I drilled a hole so I could have a tweer pipe in it to blow air in, and now I can just put charcoal in there. I could put coal in there. I could actually put wood in there if I wanted to.
Yeah, with the air
And
blower, you get lots more heat.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that forge cost me probably $10 to build, plus my time. So it's fairly cheap to get started with a forge. But I've actually seen a couple of people online doing these little tiny things they call bread box forges. Have you heard of these?
Is that kind of like in the coffee can with the plaster?
Sort of. So this is for charcoal instead of doing with a map torch. Um, you take you go to the dollar store and you buy yourself 2 bread tins, and then you grab yourself a little bucket of plaster of Paris from the local hardware store. You mix that with sand, and you fill in the cavity of the bread box or the bread pan, and hollow out the spot where you're going to keep your coal. You stick a piece of pipe down in the bottom of that, drill a hole through the bread box so that it goes through there, and you actually buy a charcoal grill fan thing. I'm not sure what they're called, but it's a little crank fan that you put on the end of this pipe, and you can hand crank it like a bellows. And you can actually get these things up to forging temperatures with nothing on the back. If you want to do it in your backyard, you can. If you want to do it in your garage, you can. And you just set it on a metal base plate, and you're good to go. You can forge that way if you want. I did that for a little while, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. I wouldn't recommend it,
Yeah.
but if that's all you got, that's all you got.
I've made one non-propane forge where it was just a metal garbage bin that I lined the outside with. It was just basically mortar with more sand in it, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and then all I had was a little pipe going in at an angle at the bottom. And I just set up a heat gun, not a hot air, not a hair dryer, because I didn't have a hair dryer. I just had a heat gun laying around, so I used the heat gun.
Hmm.
Um, and it worked pretty good. I just used some pelleted, like pellet stove fuel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it ever got like to forging temperatures, but I managed to get metal red hot, so I was happy.
As far as I'm concerned, if you can bend it with a hammer, it's forging temperature. So why
100%.
not? But yeah, I mean, it's very easy to get started if you really want to. So you know, anybody listening who's interested in trying it, just go ahead and try. It's not hard.
Yeah, no, it's people used to do it 500 years ago. Why couldn't
Yeah.
we do it now?
Well, like I said earlier, it's people in sub-Saharan Africa are still doing it with rocks on steel. Like They're taking scrap steel and making things with rocks. So if they can do it, we can do it.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you can think of that people need for getting started? I'm kind of at a loss. I mean,
Um,
a hacksaw is a good thing to have, and
yeah, that I was just thinking hacksaw because you really don't want to be handling a piece of metal that's like 8 feet long if you don't have to.
no, it's
Um,
awkward.
yeah.
And
So hacksaw,
maybe a
good blades.
welder.
Yeah, yeah. If you can afford a welder, absolutely. I would do that. I still can't afford one.
Yeah, me
Uh,
neither.
it's definitely on the list because making tools like we've seen with MRJ, he's making some pretty incredible tools just with a welder and his own ingenuity. So
That dude is an unstoppable redneck. I fully support it.
yep, yeah. I would love to actually go see his shop sometime because he's an
Agreed.
impressive guy.
Agreed. That would be a very interesting place to be, I'm quite sure.
Yeah. The first time that he made something on one of our blacksmithing challenges, he made a belt buckle. I'm sitting there like, oh, I made a hook.
And I remember seeing that belt buckle. It was awesome. That must have
Yeah.
taken him a fucking long time.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, he made specialized tools to be able to do it, and just that is impressive enough that I've got to follow him forever just to see what he's doing. And we're actually trying to work out a little trade deal on the side because he's kind of hesitant to start working with stuff that's over an inch wide. I've made hammers with stuff that's over an inch wide, and he's good with a welder. I'm not. So we're trying to make a side trade, do a little agorism on the side there on Twitter, and trade some tools back and forth, which is it's going to be cool, I think.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get to trade him for one of those guillotine dies
Oh yeah,
because obviously that's just wicked. And he's got the fabrication process down.
oh yeah. No, looking at those dies that he's making is just incredible.
It's a pretty interesting little nook of anarchy Twitter we got going on here with the blacksmithing guild.
Yeah,
I love it.
and it's very positive too, which I like. It's reminiscent of that whole meme that's going around right now, the kings helping kings thing,
Yeah,
or
the
blacksmiths
supportive
helping
kings.
blacksmiths. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard for somebody to see this and have anything shitty to say, you know? Like,
yeah,
what? Where did that even come from?
yeah. So I mean, some statist could come in and say, "Hey, you guys need government." It's like, go away. We're making hooks. So,
Yeah, piss off. I don't even know what you're doing here. How did you find us?
hmm exactly.
Um, and then
So
the next thing on our list here is materials,
yeah, that's what I was just
scrap,
gonna say.
etc. Where to get it?
Yep. So I think my experience is a little biased in this because I work in an industry that there's a lot of scrap that I get for free. Um, so it's probably not the most helpful, but it sort of tells you where to look. Um, so in making tools and punches, chisels, that kind of thing, um, if you're looking for good metal to be able to do that on the cheap, if you can get in with somebody who works on garage doors or security gates, a lot of the springs that run those things are about 5/8 inch or 3/8 inch diameter springs, and that stuff is good hardenable steel.
Yeah,
So
spring steel.
yeah, absolutely, it's good stuff. So if you can get in there, do that. If not, I would look around for any sort of steel yard that does allow you to buy from them. They're becoming even more rare, as we were saying before. Uh, but those are good places. Um, Checking with your local auto wrecker if they are getting rid of a coil spring or a leaf spring. That's all really good steel to make tools out of. But if you're looking to make ornamental stuff, just look for anything that's actually steel that is laying by the side of the road. Driving by and it says free. There's a sign out by it. Stop
On
by and just take it.
the topic of places that you can work that have scrap, a lot
Yep.
of heavy equipment operator jobs,
Hmm.
they replace blades. So
Yeah.
every machine has replaceable blade tips, and
Hmm.
quite often they take them off and they just throw them in a pile. So if you can
Yeah.
go talk to one of these guys that runs like a gravel quarry, or they have
Yeah.
graders that are doing road maintenance, the odds are pretty good that they have a pile of steel sitting around that they might let you take from.
Yeah. And on that same note, is if you have an equipment rental place near you, it's
Yes.
mostly cities that have that they're getting rid of like the blades from jackhammers, or the chisels from jackhammers, and the teeth from excavators, that kind of thing. That's always good stuff.
Hmm. It's surprisingly not very hardened though. It's kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's because it's a replaceable part, so they don't want to waste good
Yeah.
steel on it.
But a lot of the time, you're actually going to find that these are hardenable steels. So they've actually been hardened and then tempered back to a lot softer than they normally would be. Especially jackhammer bits.
Yeah, that would
Those
be the
things,
stuff.
yeah, those are really good. And the teeth from excavators, apparently, I've never actually done it myself, but based on what I've read, can be hardened pretty much to the point where you can use it as a chisel. So
They're just so fucking big. Like,
yeah.
good luck. Good luck
Yep.
getting a pair of tongs that'll lift that, you know?
Yeah, no, it's like that piece of steel that you posted a picture of a couple of weeks ago. I think it's gigantic.
Dude, I'm gonna have a hard time working that. But I'm excited about it.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
might make a little bit of a machete situation.
That'd be kind of cool. Um, I'm trying to remember. There's a guy that was on Twitter for a while. His name's @Mac, I think. Not at Mac, but @Mac. He's on Keybase now, but he's he's going to be making a blade, like a machete blade, out of a piece of H13 steel.
Ooh,
And he's promised to keep me updated on that, and I'm really excited to see what he does with it.
that would be sweet.
Yeah, but I can't imagine where he got that giant piece of steel, because I can't find H13 to save my life. So
I've got some serious goals in that area. I want to make a scythe blade because
yeah.
I mean buying a scythe it's like anvils, you know, it's a unique
Hmm.
little niche thing and they've got it marked up to retarded prices.
Yeah.
Um, but it beats the crap out of a weed whacker.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen people clear fields with those things. I live in Amish country. It's
Oh,
it's pretty crazy.
that'd be
That's an admirable goal to be able to make a scythe, because those are actually a very specialized tool that you don't see very often. Um, Around here in the scrap, like the antique stores, I actually see them fairly often, but that's because I live where I live.
yeah.
Um, we I see hand sides, I see the big ones that people used to mow their lawns back in the day or whatever. But
Oh, crop.
yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. That was their main purpose. But it's interesting how many of them that I see, but they are jacked up to like $200-300 for a scythe, um, even around here. So I don't know. It's a cool thing if you want to be able to make one. The only problem that I see is making the handle in the right shape.
Yeah,
That's got to be tough.
the crazy all the angles. I mean, you can just get a straight stick and then put a 90-degree handle for your second hand, so it's
Yeah, no,
a
I
little bit
mean, you
simpler.
can make, yeah, you can make whatever you need out of it. But I just look at these things like, did this guy take a 3 foot diameter log and make this handle out of it, because it's got such a huge curve in it?
I mean, that would be something that I would just use steam bending on, and then you can get it to your nice shape.
That's probably true. I
Or you
I'm
could
not a
go
woodworker.
you could even go real futuristic, like, and you could just get a PVC tube. You can use your heat
Mm,
guns on it, and you can shape it to the right shape. And although
yeah,
that's a sin, that's just quite ugly,
yeah. I mean, it'll
unacceptable.
work. That's in the collapse that will work.
True, that will work in the collapse. That that's kind of why I want to make a scythe. You know, like in the
Yeah,
collapse, that is a functional tool. you know?
Absolutely. I've got my eye out for one of those old lawnmowers that spins around.
Yeah,
Uh,
a rotary push mower.
yeah, I've got my eye out for one of those because I've always wanted to use one. I've never gotten the chance. Plus, they're very useful, so why not?
Hmm. Materials. We kind of talked about iron getting um, charcoal. I mean, you can make your own charcoal, but
Yeah, you can. Um, I have not experimented with that process yet,
neither
but
have
it
I.
seems very interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
kind of
my under
smother the fire and don't let any oxygen in, and it kind of
yeah. So my understanding from what I've been reading and what a couple of guys that I know, like from up in the boonies, have done, they take old 50-gallon barrels and seal them up with wood inside and put them in a fire. I can't imagine that the barrel actually lasts that long in those conditions,
interesting.
but yeah, they just that's been their process for the past like 50, 60 years, and they use it to cook with. So I guess
Hmm.
that's Appalachia for you. But
That's really
I do
clever. I
want to,
mean, I've only ever
yeah,
seen the process as it's in one of my books from way back in the day, and basically they pile up a shitload of firewood, kind of
hmm,
in like a pyramid, and
yeah,
then they cover the base, but they leave the tip open with like mud and dirt, and
yep,
then they dig out a hole in the bottom. They start the fire, and once it's coming out the top, they cover everything in the dirt so that no air gets in. Um, and then basically what you have left is charcoal because it smothers all the oxygen, and then I don't actually know how the process works, but it leaves the fuel, right?
yeah. No, it's from what I understand, it drives off all of the volatiles. Well, not all of them, but most of the volatiles because of the lack of oxygen, and you still have your burnable fuel left. I, it's I'm not an expert on it. I know that there's a thing called a retort, uh, and that's basically how these barrels work. And I guess that would be how the mud works as well, um, to suffocate the fire but still leave it burning hot enough to leave residuals behind. So it's something that I want to experiment with in the near future.
It sounds
As
kind
soon
of
as I
like
get my own place.
vaping weed. You know, you get it hot enough, but you don't actually light it on fire.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I'm not a big partaker in weed, but a lot of my buddies are, and that does seem like what they were doing in college, and they were vaping a lot. So
That's a little bit funny to think that charcoal is just kind of like vape.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's all biological processes, right? So why wouldn't it work the same?
That's a whole tangent. Um,
Yeah,
hold on a second. Can I Can I pause this for a second?
yeah. Go for it.
All right, I'm back.
All right. So yeah, we were talking about the charcoal. I mean, it's something I'm going to get into in the near future. Hopefully, be able to figure that process out and then cut some costs from the blacksmithing hobby slash business, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and then you could supply charcoal to other people trying to start out, right?
Yeah, and it's also a viable skill for
The collapse.
collapse.
Correct.
But the like people like Skip are going to need fuel for their fires, and I'm sure there's quite a few people around me that are going to get into it if they have to. So we'll see.
It's a good input, right? Like for
Yeah,
a long, long time, the world ran on charcoal.
absolutely, it did. Yeah, and that's another that sort of ties into the gardening aspect or the permaculture aspect is being able to put in trees that you know are going to produce a lot of really high quality wood. Um, so I'm thinking things like black locust, that kind of thing, that grow quickly and create good hardwood charcoal.
Absolutely.
Um,
Depending on your region, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, around here it does pretty well, and then down in the south, I guess, of the U.S. is it does well there too. Um, not really sure what your species would be up there.
It'd probably be birch. Birch does really
Okay.
well here, and
Hmm.
it burns insanely hot.
Yeah, it's the hottest wood that I can think of around here or in my country is mesquite. Um,
Mhm.
and that burns too hot to be a really good uh, barbecuing wood, but it works smoldering. But I could imagine that being a really good blacksmithing wood. Um,
Yeah.
that would probably get you up to forge welding temperatures really well.
I if I was down south where you live, man, the number of trees I'd be growing would just be insane.
Yeah. No, so I was talking to MRJ, and he lives out in the west, and I think he's in a desert area actually. And the first hammer that I ever made, I posted a picture of it, and he's like, "You're just using a branch that you found? What are you doing, man? Like, why are you doing that?" I'm like, "Well, I'm surrounded by oak." And he's like, "Oh, I forgot." So I take it for granted that we have a bunch of oak around here. We have a bunch of hickory. We have a bunch of elm, and a lot of really good woods for blacksmithing, for I guess for charcoal making.
Hardwood forest.
Yeah, yeah. It's so East Coast U.S. We're actually doing pretty well in terms of all those kind of things. Um, I don't know. I never really thought of how lucky I am to be where I am, but I guess I am.
Yeah, I mean the only downside of being over there is that you're just so fucking surrounded by people.
Well, so I know I heard you talk about this with Skip, that the East Coast is so crowded, and you're generally right. I live probably an hour, 2 hours away from Washington D.C., which is hell on earth. But in my area, it takes me 20 minutes to get to the nearest town, and it takes me an hour to get to the nearest city. So I'm feeling pretty good where I'm at. But Pennsylvania is kind of strange. I know that when you were talking with Alex, you were like, I don't know about all these different states, but Pennsylvania is like one of those weird ones. Like we have on the East Coast, we have Philadelphia. On uh, in the interior, we have Pittsburgh, two big cities. In the middle, we have Harrisburg, and all of those places are well over 100,000 people. And then the rest of it, we call it Pennsyltucky.
the
It's in the middle of nowhere.
the boonies.
Yeah, absolutely. I I actually took a vacation to get away from my town, which is maybe 3,000 people. I
Oh,
drove 4 hours north, and there were maybe two people per square mile in the Allegheny National Forest. It's a really good state. I like it a lot, as long as the government doesn't get any more big than it is.
Pennsylvania. The only thing I know about Pennsylvania is that that's where Benjamin Franklin was from, right?
Yeah, yep, he was, and it was the first cap. Philadelphia was the first capital of the U.S. Or that was yeah, Philadelphia, first
As a
capital.
stonemason, I'm extremely interested in that area because there's a lot of really cool old stone buildings.
Yeah, yeah, they really are. Um, and it's also the heart of the steel mill industry. It was where oil was first discovered in the U.S. It's got a lot of history to it. I like Pennsylvania a lot. I was born here. I lived all up and down the East Coast, um, Georgia, Maryland, Florida, North Carolina, and a little bit inside in Arkansas, which kind of sucked. But there's a lot of different places, a lot of different people, and where I'm at, rural area, really nice. But Montana is where I want to end up. So,
Just below me.
hmm
Interesting. Um,
I've always liked Canada. Honestly, it seems like a cool place, except for your national government sucks.
it's the sickness. It makes me go back to the whole. I don't think I'm Canadian anymore. I haven't called myself Canadian in a
Yeah,
long time.
yeah.
Uh, I'm Albertan. I'm from the West. When you say
See
Canadian, people think people from the East.
that strikes me a lot as the secessionist movement that they have going on in Quebec. I wish they would have that more over in the West.
We have it.
'Cause it's, do you? 'Cause I
Oh
didn't. I've never
yeah,
heard about
man.
it.
Oh, there's a
You always hear
great
about
big
Quebecois, but you
separatism
never
thing.
hear about anybody else.
We've had many different times where there have been separatists. We almost separated from Canada around World War One. We There was a
Yeah,
big push in Alberta to separate from Canada in the 30s in the Great Depression, where we actually stopped using Canadian money. We used our own currency.
nice.
Um, and right now it's booming. They're starting a new political party called Wexit. Um, I mean, I used to be pretty into it, but then I lost the feel for it because they're all just a bunch of statists.
Yeah.
You know, they want another political party, and they want I don't know. It just it left a bad taste in my mouth when they started posting all these Trump memes and bomb Iran memes, and I
Yeah.
was like, are you people out of your mind?
Yeah. It always turns into that false dichotomy.
Yeah,
It's always us versus them and all that kind of stuff instead of us for us. But
exactly. It's you'd think that if they're trying to leave the country, they're so close to being liberty, right? But they just go
yeah,
straight into the neocon. They're like, oh, we're not liberals.
I love it when people do that. It's just, well, we're not liberals, so we can't do our own thing.
Yeah, what else could we be?
Uh, that reminds it's so based on what you're telling me there, it just sounds like Alberta's a lot like Texas and trying to become its own thing,
A
which is
hundred
kind of
percent.
cool.
100%. It's weird. I try to think of what part of America we're the most like, and Texas is right up there. But there's
Yep.
the obvious difference about Texas is it's right next to Mexico, and it's really
Yep.
hot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, you're probably the closest to Montana, honestly, because it's close geographically, and they're very outspoken about their freedom there. So
or maybe
well,
Alaska.
yeah, maybe Alaska. I've never been to Alaska. I would love to go. It seems like a really great place, but that seems, I don't know. Alaska still seems like the last frontier to a lot of Americans. Um, it's one of those places that it's within reach, but it's a little too far to go. It's almost a little scary. I don't know. So I've been an East Coast guy my entire life. I hate the cities, but I love the East Coast. And by East Coast, I mean Appalachia.
Right.
But it's interesting how different the cities are from the country. Because I can't think of a single person out here who would ever endorse any of the political strategies that are going on in the cities. Even as close to me as Harrisburg, which is that's our state capital. That's right up there. It's not that far away, but it's so far away politically and culturally that I just don't understand it. So
I
I
mean,
think it's cities versus country.
for us, that divide goes west versus east.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I could see that. Like the way that you guys have your provinces laid out, I could definitely see that. It's sort of like the difference between here in Pennsylvania, like in the cities versus taking something like Denver in Colorado. Like Denver is a liberal place, but it's not as liberal as say San Francisco, which is coastal, or New York. So if you're in the middle of the country, you're a lot more into freedom than you would be otherwise.
yeah. Well, urban versus rural, it seems to be
Yeah, yeah,
across the board urban versus rural.
yeah. I would say that. But I don't know. You want to get into this other topic here of dangers of blacksmithing?
I mean, absolutely. It's kind of extremely relevant because we just started talking about uncoated
Yeah,
KO on Twitter the other day.
yeah. I was really impressed that came up, and I'm glad that we were able to talk to some people about that.
Yeah.
Um, so you're the propane expert. If you want to go into
Oh, now
what you.
I'm no expert. I
All
uh,
right,
I fuck around like an amateur. Um,
all right.
but definitely. that KO being exposed. You don't want that. That's
No.
one thing I know for sure. Like I
Yeah.
used that forge uncoated a couple times, but I was
Hmm.
always really careful to be outdoors in a windy environment, a place where there's
Yeah.
no air containment. Um, you know,
Yeah, I feel like that's one thing that we didn't really touch on with the people that were asking about it. Is if you're working with K wool and you are working with it hot, your danger is minimized by being outside. It's
it's not
still
removed.
not safe. No, yeah, it's not safe.
And
But
some people think that it's fine as long as you don't bump it and make the dust go around, but that's not the
yeah,
case.
no,
It aerosolizes, and it like I was reading some posts in that home built forge group I
yep,
got on Facebook, and this guy was saying like after he used his uncoated KOL forge, he found just white dust all over the ground.
yep.
Um, that's horrifying,
It,
man.
no, it can be very scary with that kind of thing, especially when you learn about what K wool is. It's like a low grade asbestos, which
Yeah,
is not good. Um,
and your lungs just don't like it. Like you see some of
yeah,
those X-rays where the guy's only hazard in his entire life is forge, and he's just
yep,
got chunks of lung gone.
yep. It's not a good thing. So anyone who is considering doing propane, if you're going to be getting a K wool lined forge, please coat it.
Please.
If you want some more information on that, check out iforgeiron.com. Search on the propane forge sections of that forum, and you'll find a lot of really good information on that. Also, Josh has put out a really good thread on Twitter about that. Um,
And
so
there's also the Alex Steele video where he's making his forge. He
yeah,
goes
yeah,
into it
yep,
pretty in depth.
yep.
Um,
I would say that he goes into it probably 75% as much as I would like him to go into it, and that's more than anyone else that I've ever seen on YouTube do that.
yeah,
So that's really good. But further into it on how to protect yourself against KOL. It's a very useful product, but it can be very dangerous. Um,
extremely dangerous.
next thing, the next most dangerous thing I can think of in blacksmithing is trying to forge with scrap that you found that is coated with heavy metals.
Yeah,
Um,
galvanized.
yeah, galvanized and also chromium plated. Um, any sort of plating. You want to be very careful with plating because those things it's so thin that when you get it to a certain temperature, it will aerosolize and you'll be able to take that in as a vapor. That's never a good thing with heavy metals. So galvanization is zinc coating, and zinc poisoning can do really terrible things to your brain. Be careful with that. If you
Absolutely.
want to negate that, you can take anything that's galvanized and soak it for a very long period of time in vinegar. Uh, small things you can soak overnight and they will shed their galvanization. Uh, large things you're going to want to let soak for a very long time, or you can use hydrochloric acid. Muriatic acid is a reduced form of that's used to clean pools. You can also find that in like Home Depot or any hardware store, really.
Hmm.
They'll take that stuff off. Yeah, have you never heard of the muriatic acid thing?
No, I've just heard of vinegar.
Okay, yeah. So muriatic acid, you got to be careful with that too, which is another thing. But if you're going to soak things in muriatic acid, uh, you put it in there for probably an hour. You're going to see a lot of bubbling. It gives off hydrogen gas, so don't do it near an open flame.
Good point.
Um, you're also going to need to not breathe it in because it gives off the vapors that you don't want while it's taking the coating off. So probably do it in a well ventilated area.
Yeah.
Um, but you're not standing directly over it, so that's positive. Um, it's the same with galvanization. It's the same with chromium. Chromium, all these things can cause severe brain damage if you inhale them. So don't do that. And just take care. If you're going to be working with anything that you're not sure of, test it first. Put it into some vinegar. See if it starts to bubble after about half an hour. Um, just don't breathe it in. Is a
That
big thing.
this also applies to smelting bronze because apparently a lot of bronze has
Yeah.
zinc in it.
Yep.
and that'll give you pretty serious brain damage.
Yeah, no, so the worst, just as a warning to most people, the worst I've heard about zinc poisoning um, is a guy was forging on some scrap metal in his forge up in Canada actually. I think he was in Vancouver, um, and he was in an enclosed area while he was forging. Um, and by the end of the day, he was feeling some twitching like in one of his arms, and by the next day he had died of cardiac arrest. So you don't want to inhale this stuff; it can severely hurt you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we're not
so
talking about small risks here.
no, it can be life or death. So you have to be very careful. I've before I knew about all this stuff, I built my first forge with a galvanized pipe in it. Luckily, I was working outside, or I may be talking to you with a
You
really
might
severe
not
brain
even
damage.
be.
Well,
You might
yeah,
not even be.
yeah, that's true. I may be dead. But yeah, just be careful with it. It's nothing to trifle with.
Yes, my Canucks just scored.
Nice.
Good. Got an early lead on these bastards. We're on a 4-game losing streak, man.
Is this towards the end of the season, or what are you guys
Yeah.
doing?
We're just coming up to the playoffs and we were in
Okay.
first in the Pacific, and then we just plummeted out of there because we've been losing. But this is good. Sorry, that's a tangent. Back to the dangers. Um, One thing which seems pretty obvious that we haven't discussed is the danger of just fucking straight up blowing yourself to pieces, which is a
Yeah.
serious danger.
Yeah.
If you if you're working with propane and you
Yep.
don't have your welds all sealed up and you're using forced air, and
Yeah.
that's a
No, it
good
can.
way to die.
Yeah. It can be super terrifying actually. I'm not super familiar with the whole propane thing. One thing that I have heard about it is to be careful if you're going to be soaking your tubs in warm water. Um, I'm not sure if that's actually a legitimate concern. A lot of people seem to think that it is. Uh, but like if you're going to be running propane for a long time, obviously the cylinder is going to be very cold
Yeah,
because it's getting rid of a lot of that gas. But I've heard some guys say that if you're keeping your propane cylinder in a bath of warm water, it can cause explosions. I don't know if that's true. Um, I'm just putting that out there as something that I've heard. So
that's good to know.
again, be careful.
I've never heard of it exploding, but I have heard of soaking it in the warm water because I've experienced that with
Yeah.
propane because it off gases so fast that it freezes up
Yep.
just because of the displacement. But that's more of an issue with your regulator. You need a better propane regulator because you're
Yeah.
not supposed to be running out of propane that quick.
No, yeah, that makes sense. It's so again, I'm not like a propane expert or anything like that, but
Yeah, me
I
neither.
would just say take all of the precautions that you can. Get yourself a really good regulator. Get yourself a good tank. Get yourself a good burner, or build yourself a good burner, and make sure that it's a very good burner if you're building it. Um, and just take all the normal care that somebody would if you're messing around with something very explosive.
Which you are, and it's not a safe gas. When it goes out of your plumbing, it's not going to just disperse into the air. It falls to the ground and puddles like a liquid,
Yeah,
um, and then it goes boom.
yeah.
Uh,
It's a very volatile sort of thing to be playing with. So keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, again, I don't know that much about propane, so that's all I got to say about that part.
yeah, honestly, me
Um,
neither. I just I make sure I do it in an area that's very, very well ventilated. I never do it like
yeah,
in a shed. I'm always
yep,
out on the driveway, and it's a windy day, and if anything does go wrong and I got a leak, it's
yeah.
nothing's gonna
Well,
hurt me.
yeah, and that sort of brings up a point with charcoal and regular coal forges. It's not as dangerous, obviously, but carbon monoxide poisoning can be a thing. So
Mhm.
if you are working in an enclosed space, make sure you have some sort of ventilation going on. Um, I'm in the process of planning my indoor shop. Right now, I work in the open air, but coming up here when I get my own house and I can build a shop. It's going to be open eaves. It's going to have cross breezes with a fan forcing a little bit of air through it. I've stood directly over a coal fire before, and I've gotten headaches, gotten some severe coughs just from inhaling that the fumes from that.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with that as well. It's not nearly as dangerous as propane, but it is still relatively dangerous.
Oh, for sure. It's it's the fire. The fire is danger no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to burns,
Very
which
good
is
point.
the most obvious form of danger that is in this hobby. So
Underlooked
um,
though.
it is,
Oh,
and I don't think people understand the severity that these burns can be if you don't do the right thing. A lot of people think that a burn is something like if you're being stupid and you grab like a tray in the oven without putting an oven mitt on or something like that. 350 degrees. You're grabbing something. It's going to give you some blisters or whatever on your fingers. I can say from experience that I've accidentally touched my arm to a 1400-degree piece of metal.
oh
Um,
gosh.
I'm I'm looking at the scar right now. The thing about it is it didn't hurt
Yeah. Well,
until
it burns your nerves like
yeah,
instantly.
yeah.
Um,
So it was basically I heard the sizzle, I smelled bacon, and then 30 minutes later my arm started throbbing and I realized that I had burned myself.
oh,
So you gotta be very careful with that stuff.
and it's surprisingly it's like the siren song. It makes me feel like a stupid monkey. Like I've got that hot piece of iron and it's on the anvil and I'm hitting it and it goes from red hot to slightly less and then it's cooling down and it's turning gray and part of my stupid brain thinks, well, geez, how hot could it be? Could I touch it?
Yeah,
you
that's got to
know
be cool now, right?
yeah, it's got to be cool now. And oh my god, it's probably still
Yeah,
900 degrees.
yeah. So a perfect example of this is not it's not with blacksmithing, but what I like to do at the end of my forging sessions is melt down some like cola cans, my energy drinks and whatnot that I have out there with me. I melt that down in a crucible and I pour it into an ingot. So I have a little bit of extra aluminum just hanging out. It looks cool and it's fun to have. But I pour it and then I tip it out and then I let it sit for about 10 minutes. I reach over and I grab it with my leather gloves and my leather gloves stick to it and start burning through my finger to my fingertips. That's aluminum cools probably twice the rate that steel does.
If not more
So
than double.
yeah, you got to be very, very careful touching hot steel. If you're going to try and touch something that you know is relatively cool, like say 350 degrees, touch it with the back of your hand. So you're not burning the nerves on the part of the hand that you actually care about.
Yeah, and
So
plus it's not a part you use all the time.
yeah, not the part you're using while you're forging too. So that's another big thing.
Hmm.
And now I think the last like danger that I'm thinking of is sort of like that episode of The Office. I don't know if you have you seen the American version of The Office?
Yep, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the episode where they sort of contrast the dangers of working in the warehouse versus with the actual upstairs guys is they talk about carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah,
So it's a danger, but it's kind of a mundane danger. You got to do proper hammering. You have to stay in this right stance. Don't screw around. Don't like throw things out of proportion with your arm. You don't want to strain things if you don't have to, and definitely stop if you hurt something, because you don't. Even though you're a blacksmith and you're a badass, you don't want to hurt yourself and have it keep hurting as you go.
that's a
So
good point. It's a repeated motion that
yeah,
you do the whole time in the same way.
yep. Repeated stress injury can be a big thing. So just watch out for that. And I think that's just a normal thing that a lot of people do now. So hopefully they know what to look out for.
I mean, it's kind of like everything, we could put safety warnings all over it, but realistically, what you want to do is just be freaking careful.
Yeah, I mean, pay attention to your body. Know what you're feeling and why you're feeling it, and change things as you have to. It's a big thing.
Yeah, if you feel dizzy, probably stop.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that's something I didn't even think about.
Oxygen
Dehydration.
deprivation. Oh, and
That too.
dehydration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, oxygen deprivation is a big thing, and well, the oxygen deprivation is huge with propane, especially if you're in an enclosed space.
Yeah.
Um,
Because that fire
and
burns
same,
off all the oxygen.
yeah, and same with same with coal and charcoal and all that. But something that I've actually experienced is dehydration, because you sort of don't realize how dehydrated you're getting if it's like 100 degrees outside, and by 100 degrees I'm talking, I want to say like 30 or 40 or 50 degrees. I don't really know what the Celsius is on that.
Uh, yeah. I mean,
So
I'll
I
Google
know
it. I'll Google it.
you've talked about this with a couple of guys, but I just to put it in perspective, 72 degrees here is about 21 degrees there, I want to say.
100 degrees is 38,
Okay, 38 degrees.
which is
So
an
if you're
unbelievable
forging,
temperature for me. If it was 38 degrees, I
yeah.
would be like, I'd be out. I'd be laying
Oh,
in
dude.
a puddle of water
So
somewhere.
Pennsylvania is known as one of the northern states of the U.S. We get up to 108 on a really hot day in summer. So that's, again, this isn't really translating, but I've been forging out in those temperatures, and I've forged for probably 4 or 5 hours. I've come in, drank a lot of water because I was thirsty, and then gotten like really cold sweats and had to lay down and take a nap. It's that's the onsets of really
Heat
bad
stroke.
dehydration. So yeah, exactly. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I could have
Yeah,
died.
man. It's not a small risk being next to a forge on a hot day.
No, because it's, you think 2,300 degree fire that you're sitting in there. Um, but yeah, it's you got to be careful with that stuff. Don't get too dehydrated. Take some water out with you. Have a good time, but don't risk yourself.
Stay safe, everybody. And kind of this isn't a serious. At this point, I should make it clear that I'm joking, but obviously, you should be drunk or high because then when you get injured, it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah, no,
That's
I posted a meme sort of about that. It's like, have you ever forged while you're hungover? I have once, and I grabbed an iron bar, and that was it. So
yeah, that's from the Trailer Park Boys. Ricky's always
oh yeah,
stoned,
yeah,
so it
yeah,
doesn't hurt
yeah.
as bad.
Yeah, no, I actually I've seen all of Trailer Park Boys. That didn't click. Really good
I
series, by the
I
way.
love that show. It's fucking hilarious, and it's also pretty agoristic. You know,
Hmm.
upon rewatching it, like Ricky's using hash dollars.
Yeah,
That's pure agorism
yeah. No, I like watching shows back that I liked before and seeing aspects of it
that you
that
missed the
sort of
first time.
call to me. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
like I think I was talking. It was probably 2 or 3 years ago. God, talking to Collapse Overwatch. Um, can't remember what he went by when I first started following him,
I know
but
who you're talking about.
yeah, Collapse Overwatch. He was he was one of the first people who ever followed me. But he asked what he should show his sons to show them the difference between the government and the people, and I said you should show him Firefly to show the libertarian perspective, and Star Wars to show the statist perspective. And he came back. He's like, "I love you, dude. That is the best idea I've ever seen in my life." And I'm like, "It's not that great, but once you rewatch these things in that perspective, it's kind of cool to see how it lines up." So,
Firefly's libertarian.
oh my god, yeah, dude.
I should
Have you
watch
not?
that one.
Yeah, have you not watched that yet?
Not yet. It's
Oh
uh,
yeah.
it's always been pretty high up the list of things that are extremely nerdy, and once I get into it, I'm one of the people. Do you know
It's
what I
only
mean?
it's only one season, and it's got a movie attached to it. but
I
it's
I will put it on the
very, very
list.
libertarian.
It's
Please
coming for
do,
sure.
because it's very, very good.
Have you seen
Um,
The Expanse?
I have not.
Oh, you need to see The Expanse. That is such a good show. A, just a good space show, and B, it's extremely agoristic and like anarchistic.
I'm
Um,
gonna write that down too.
The Expanse. It's on Amazon Prime.
I have Amazon Prime, so I'll probably start watching that tonight.
Oh, enjoy. Fuck, there's this one. I shouldn't spoil it, but I mean, it's not really much of a spoiler. There's this one scene in season 3, episode 4, where no, I can't even say it. I'll spoil it all. But when you get to that, just brace yourself because it's probably the most epic thing I've ever seen. I swear.
Well, I'm gonna look forward to it then. Nice.
Uh, yeah, freaking. I will definitely download Firefly. I'll put that on my list underneath this M.T. Richardson Practical Blacksmithing book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's just not to spoil anything, because I'm not spoiling anything here, but it's very libertarian in the fact that you start out with space. Okay, I'm not sure how to phrase this, but space plunderers. They're not
Yeah,
pirates, but they go around and they salvage things that aren't theirs, but they're not claimed by
scavengers.
anybody else. Yeah, they're scavengers.
It's like
Um,
maritime law, where you can
yeah,
claim.
yeah. No, they're outside of the empire's jurisdiction, but not really, because the empire says that it's not.
As they
So
do.
it, yeah, as they do.
Uh, that
So
that kind of neatly takes us off of the topic of dangers into agorism,
sure does.
uh, which is kind of the whole point of this whole podcast here. We're trying to overgrow the
Yeah.
system. I mean,
Yep.
blacksmithing is a great way to overgrow the system because once you're making your own tools to make other tools, you can start making tools for other people.
Yep.
You can, you're off to the races.
Yep. Now, I'll give you an example here just to start us off. It's so my dad was here building his house, probably a year and a half ago or something like that. I came out because he was out of town to supervise a couple of guys doing a job. And we had one guy come up and dump a load of stone. And he came out to me and said, "Hey, are you, this guy's son?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, I'm related to him. Do you know this guy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know that guy." He's like, "Oh, he's one of our good friends." I'm like, "That's my cousin." So he goes, "What's that stuff over there?" He points over to my blacksmithing stuff, and it's, my anvil's sitting there, my post vise, all that kind of stuff. And I said, I blacksmith. And he's like, "Okay, that's pretty cool. Do you do this, this?" I said, I do hooks, and I do, normal, like, household items and whatnot." He goes, "Would you be willing to do that for me?" I said, "Well, sure." And he goes, "All right, well, I will trade you bringing this specific thing to you to be able to have you do this to me, or do this for me."
Yeah,
I said, "Okay." So I made him a couple of hooks. He brought an unspecified commodity over to me, and
understood.
we and we had a deal. Uh, that's I spent maybe an hour making these hooks, and he spent, you know 3-4 months growing said product, and we were good.
I thought you said you didn't use that.
I don't. I sell.
Oh, that's the way to be.
Just to
That's
my
the
friends. Just
clever
to my
man.
friends.
Oh, of
No,
course.
it's mostly just for to pay them for other things that they give me. So we're doing a whole agorist thing, and they don't even realize it, because most of them are pretty statist. So
That's kind of the beautiful thing about agorism. A lot of people, they're not only for it, but they do it, and they don't
yeah,
realize that they're just doing it to break the law. I
exactly. Yeah.
that sentence kind of died on delivery, but you know what I mean.
No,
Like,
no, no. Yeah, I got you, because like these guys aren't trying to be agorists, but they are agorists regardless of what they're doing.
it's like Ricky. I don't think they had any sort of intention of writing Ricky as like an anarchist idol.
Yeah.
He's just a criminal. But some
Yeah.
criminals,
Exactly.
if they're honorable,
Yeah.
are a little bit, you know,
Well,
Beauty goal.
if you're you get another goal there.
Oh, it was beautiful, man. Sorry.
Nice. No, you're good. But no, yeah, it's that whole thing that Thomas Jefferson quote that everybody likes to put out there is, you know, any unjust law should be or must be disregarded by an honorable man or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. If the
It just
law is
it makes sense
unjust,
that way,
you should.
and a lot of yeah, if a law is unjust, you are not only justified in
Uh,
disobeying it, you are obligated to, or something like that.
I think that's how it
But
goes.
yeah, but a lot of these guys that I know, that they're not into this whole thing. They don't care, but they want to smoke their weed. They want to have a good time, and they don't really care what the law says. And they're being agorists in that way, and I'm going to encourage that if I can.
Absolutely. Is it not legal where you're at?
It's so it's really weird in Pennsylvania, man. It's legal in the form of pills, like extracts,
Yeah.
but not THC bearing extracts, but not CBD. It it's really weird. It's medical, but it's not weed.
Interesting.
If
It's
that
like
makes it
yeah, all the chemicals in hemp except for THC.
yeah, it's really strange. It's so one of my buddies who plays D&D with us, like all my buddies that come over there, they smoke down in the basement. Um, this guy that he lives in Maryland where it is legal, he brings up joints all the time, and nobody really cares and nobody really gives a shit. But up here in Pennsylvania, it's like, hey, you can only have it if it's in a pill form or something like that.
Strange.
Yeah. Pennsylvania is weird. Like our liquor laws are really, really weird. You can go into a gas station and buy beer, but you can only buy 2 6-packs at a time. But if you go out and you put the 2 6-packs in your car and then come back in and buy 2 more 6-packs, that's legal. So why not?
I mean, that's strange. You're not allowed to buy just a 40 pack.
If you go to a beer distributor, you can.
Oh,
So
they don't have those at the gas station.
yeah. So no,
Right.
there's 3 different types of liquor distributors here in Pennsylvania. There's uh, 6-pack dispensaries, which are basically gas stations and 6-pack stores or restaurants. And then there's beer distributors who can sell 30 packs down to 6-packs. And then there's the liquor store that sells anything that's not beer that is owned by the state.
Interesting.
It's weird.
That sounds pretty convoluted. Here, everything
Yeah.
is it's kind of like America where you have different laws in your states. We have different laws per province.
Yeah.
And so in Alberta, it's different than Saskatchewan. In Saskatchewan, you have to buy things from the government liquor board, but in
Yep.
Alberta, it's free. So the town I live in Red Deer, and we're pretty famous in Red Deer for having the most liquor stores per capita of any place in Canada. There's an intersection where I can stand on one a crosswalk sidewalk thing, and I look
Yeah.
around and I can see 8 liquor stores from where I'm standing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's so convoluted the way that they do things because Pennsylvania was it was a Quaker state way back in the day. So are you familiar with Quakers at all?
A little bit. They're kind of like Amish, but they don't do colonies, and they're just extremely pacifistic.
Yeah. So
It's yeah,
I would sort of eliminate the Amish part from it. They're nonviolent, which is great. But so they basically colonized this. So William Penn is what Pennsylvania is named after him, and then we went on to become like a Protestant state. So we had blue laws. Blue laws are like you can't sell liquor on a Sunday. It's kind of strange that way. But we ended up going to this weird system where the state owns liquor stores. They don't own beer distributors. Up until last year, we couldn't buy beer in a gas station Now we can buy it, but only in certain quantities, and it has to be at a separate register from where you buy gas. So it's become such a strange, convoluted system that no one knows how it works. And when we have people come up from other states or down from other states, they've gotten pissed off at the registers to the point where they have like almost assaulted people for being angry about not being able to buy beer, to where now we have signs in front of the registers: you can't buy beer at this register, but you can buy it at this register. So
That's just dumb.
it's really stupid. I don't understand it.
I mean, it opens up the market for bootleggers from Canada, right? All that prohibition.
Oh yeah, you can come right across like Lake Erie and bring it right in.
Yeah.
Good times.
Lake Erie. Where is Lake Erie? That's Ontario, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Probably.
Not sure though. I'm from America. We don't have the best public schools here.
I don't think the best public schools exist anywhere. They're just,
That's true.
you
And
know,
when I say public schools, I mean government schools. So let me correct that.
yeah, absolutely. Government indoctrination camps, as Matt says,
Yes,
which is true. Um,
absolutely it is.
like I was talking to a buddy of mine about, I mean, he's a statist and I'm a anarchy type, and he said, you're strange. Like nobody agrees with you. And I said, well, yeah, but you realize that that's because everybody went through more than a decade of government indoctrination camps. And he kind of had a light bulb moment, where his
Yeah.
eyebrows went up and he was like, oh, that's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've had numerous conversations with a lot of my friends from college. Like, I became more enlightened about how the government school system is pretty terrible later in life, and I've had a lot of conversations with these people saying, this is how it is, and this is why that you believe what you believe. And maybe two or three people have come around. It's kind of depressing in that respect, but then it's also, optimistic in the fact that there's two or three people that came around. So hopefully there's more.
So how did you become an anarchist?
Ooh, that's a long story. um, I'll give you the shortened version. So my dad was a Republican for the longest time in my life. Um, I ended up being a libertarian, like TM libertarian in
Yeah,
college.
Big L,
Uh,
right?
tran- yeah, Big L, and then transitioned to be a small L libertarian after grad school, after having gone through communism, um, monarchism, and fascism. And now I am an anarchist.
What do you mean going through, like, you believed in communism, then monarchy, and then fascism?
Uh, on the surface, yes. Um, so surface
Interesting.
level, yeah, it's surface level. Like, I believed that people needed to be controlled for a very long time, and then I realized that no, people make up everything that we think of as government.
Hmm.
Um, and then I became what I am now, which is I don't need to be controlled. So why would anybody else need to be controlled? Um, People are inherently good, I think. And I'm not religious, so I'm not sure where that belief comes from, but it comes from somewhere that I think is logical.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not religious, but I hold certain things to be sacred,
Yeah,
and I do believe that people are inherently not uh, evil, as some people say.
yeah,
Like all those. I hate the nihilism these days. It makes me sick.
yeah. So I went through a very nihilistic period in college, and I think that's where I hit like I thought I was trying to be a fascist thing.
Jesus, that makes
Where
me cringe.
oh yeah, absolutely, it's terrible. Looking back on it, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? But you
The
know,
jackboots of progress or something.
yeah, we're all really stupid in our own ways when we're kids. Like we're either communists or we're fascists or we're all of the above. And they don't really, I don't think there's a huge leap from being a communist to a fascist. So You know,
No, they're pretty similar. They're on
yeah,
very equal levels of authoritarianism.
yeah. And I was also going through this whole thing where I was in college and being told that I was a terrible person all the time because I'm a white guy, and I'm just like, okay, stop with this. And then, at some point, I was just like, none of this matters. Not in a nihilistic fashion, but in all these people are trying to tell me these things, but that nothing is actually being reflected in my everyday life. So why would I pay attention to it? So I came to understand that, I am who I am. Everybody else is who they are. Uh, let's all just live and let live, but not in a hippie fashion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in a more of a, you know, a Jesus fashion. Although he was kind of a
Sure.
hippie.
Oh yeah, no, he definitely was. But it was a weird transition. I think it was mostly adolescent rebellion, um, and then coming to understand who I am as myself, and as a separate person from everybody else. So I'm not really sure. It
I,
was an
I,
interesting journey.
I mean, if you don't regret the things that you did when you were a 21-year-old, 10 years down the line, were you ever even a 21-year-old?
Exactly. Yes.
You're just not doing it right.
I look back on that guy and I'm like, dude, fuck you. You're like every other goddamn person I see on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of in the same boat. I mean, I never went through that sort of political uh convoluted path because my entire life I've kind of, I mean, I'm in Canada, so I have a completely different view on it. And
Yeah.
I'm more to the point, I'm in Western Canada where
Yep.
people for generations have hated the feds.
Yep.
And so I kind of always associated any sort of state control as just, a bureaucratic boondoggle that
Yep.
expands to meet its own needs and just doesn't function in any way. But when I was a 21-year-old shit, I was just so embarrassingly strange, the whole white kid with dreadlocks doesn't believe in
Yep.
anything normal, just
Yep.
strange and silly.
Yeah. We all go through something really, really stupid when we're 21. Whatever. So,
It's part of the learning curve, You got to
yeah, you
start
have to find,
somewhere.
you have to get through some experience in life before you understand who you actually are and what you actually believe. I think is the big thing.
Absolutely. And if you don't believe things that are wrong, how could you ever, learn?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big thing is like, if you can't challenge your own beliefs with the beliefs of others and understand what others believe, do you actually believe what you believe? I don't know if you do, because if you don't think about your own beliefs that deeply, then it's very easy to say, I'm a libertarian or whatever.
Yeah.
We see that a lot with, say Liberty Hangout, those kind of things.
I've
It's
had them muted for so long.
See, I don't, because it's for the memes.
True, true. I'll never
um,
understand those memes because I miss all that.
but it's basically like they call themselves libertarians, but they don't actually understand what libertarianism is. So are they really libertarian? But then I get called out for gatekeeping. I don't. It's
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean,
That's
that's
why
why
I've
I don't
I've
really call
transitioned.
myself a libertarian.
Yeah, that's why I've transitioned to being an anarchist with no descriptors, because it's just basically leave me alone, let me do what I want, and I'm good. As long as we're moral about it, we're good.
Yeah. Follow the nap. That's all you got to do,
Yeah.
which the government will never be able to.
No, the government is inherently a monopoly on force, and we can't get away from that. So
They can't exist if they don't have coercion.
exactly.
Well, that leads us to trading and barter, which is kind
Yeah.
of the backbone of agorism. And we kind of addressed it with the whole black market, trading some hooks
Yep.
for some herbal medicine. Uh,
Yep.
and that's ideal. That's the ideal situation, right?
Yeah, it keeps you off of the radar of everybody. So why not?
And can they even say that you like what are they going to charge you with? You can't get charged with buying it because you didn't buy it.
So here's the weird thing about the IRS is that they try and tax you for every single thing possible, um, up and including up to and including the exchange of services. So if you were to come over and try and mow my lawn, for me giving you, say, I don't know, a bottle opener, because that's what's in front of me,
Yeah.
they want to charge the tax on the value of the bottle opener because that's what you were paid.
Rat fucking bastards. I gotta pour a drink
Yeah,
on that note. Sons of
yeah,
bitches.
that's what I'm saying. It's just like, so how do you get around that? And that's by not reporting it, obviously, but you have to have an understanding with your neighbors that none of us are going to be paying the tax on this. We are going to be exchanging these goods for a service, and we're not going to be telling anybody that that's what happened. So that's the agorist part. It's like with the blacksmithing, I make you something, you give me something for it, uh, and then we are square because that's voluntary exchange right there.
It's amazing that they are bold enough to try to insert themselves into a gift economy.
Dude, I was just filling out my taxes, and they were like, "Hey, have you done any of these things? Have you bought anything out of state?" It's like, I'm not going to tell you. Why would I voluntarily report that? And I
Allegedly,
know they're
allegedly, to the feds
yeah.
listening, we are not condoning tax evasion.
Well, no, it's so I have not actually bought anything out of state, quote unquote.
No, of course not.
But you know, even if I had, why would I tell you? The only people who actually would report these things on their tax return are people who are so deeply invested in this statist system that they're the Karens of the world.
Well, or they're
They
just
will,
afraid, you know? They believe that
well,
they'll get caught.
right, but there's so many people out there who are statists who don't report these things that it's just like an ancillary. It's an ancillary rule that no one actually pays any attention
Cheers to that. The fact that the government doesn't fucking follow the rules.
to. Exactly, they do not.
If you wanted to find somebody that that obeyed the rules as little as they can, I couldn't think of anything better to think of than the government.
No, I mean they write the rules so they can get around them. So
Exactly.
why would they even follow them if they had to? Because they know how to get around. It that's the whole thing about government is that it exists to extort money from people while making itself seem like a virtuous thing. It just makes no sense.
Nope. It's crazy talk. And I'm glad we got there so quickly from trading just to
Yeah.
straight hating the government.
Well, yeah. I mean, because how can you not? I mean, if you're going to go from free trade to hating the government, it's basically one step. Hey, there's taxation. Done.
Yeah. It's interesting being in two different countries and talking about this because like your government is so much different than my government, but they
Yeah,
share so much in common.
because government is all the same is the thing because it's always a monopoly on force and it's always trying to extort money from its people. That's the only point of the government. There's no other point to its existence is other than to feed off of the people that it proclaims to protect because it
I
doesn't
mean,
actually protect anything.
to play devil's advocate, the people that support it say they say, well, it's there because um, pooled resources are more effective to use than
Sure.
individual resources.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Fucking, I still don't think that the government's the right entity to do anything, even if
Well, no.
you do accept that, like a public insurance for healthcare, or like a public fund for the infrastructure, or
Well,
take your pick of what the status claim that the government is necessary for.
yeah. No, I mean, it's basically every claim that we could make against the government and every argument that we could make against them has been rooted out of the normal populace through the government indoctrination centers throughout their entire lives. So why would they believe anything that we have to say if they've been told that this is how it works their entire lives? It wouldn't make any sense to them. It would be cognitive dissonance the entire time. It, it's the same way that like that's why I went through such a crazy cognitive dissonance stage myself. It's you spend 13 years being told that this is how you're being protected. This is why this is the best system that you could ever imagine. And then you end up being like, no, that's not correct. And everybody else is like, yes, it is. So
It's like Stockholm syndrome. If they keep you long
yeah,
enough,
yeah,
you'll start to love
yeah,
them for it.
yes. And it starts from the day you're born, and it lasts until the day you die, and then they tax your death.
Absolutely. They make the taxes so ridiculous. There's not a single thing that isn't taxed at this point, in every direction.
Yeah, or two or three times, which is
Yeah, at every step of the way.
yeah. I mean, you got so let's just take as an example. I buy a lot of security gates from a certain company who's based in the U.S., but they're actually manufactured in Germany. So the German government taxes the ore that the aluminum is made of for these gates. They tax the labor of the people who make them. They tax the product itself when it's shipped out. The U.S. government then taxes the product as it's on its way in. Uh, the people who put the portions of the gate together are then taxed for their income. The pieces of the gate are taxed as pieces. They're then taxed as a final product that's sent out to the customer. I'm charged tax as a person in the middle, although I do have a tax exemption for selling from the sales tax. But my employees then who install this gate are taxed. The fuel that they use for all of these processes is taxed. And finally, the customer is taxed for the sales tax.
And you know what? The government still loses money.
Yeah, I don't know how it's possible.
I honestly don't know how it's possible.
As a business owner, if I were to lose money on that transaction, I should be out of business.
Oh,
I
100%.
don't get it. I don't get it.
There's this old it's like a, I don't know if it's a song or a limerick or whatever the fuck, but it's tax his land, tax his bed, tax the table at which he's fed, tax his tractor, tax his mule, teach him taxes are the rule, tax his work, tax his pay, he works for peanuts anyway, tax his cow, tax his goat, tax his pants, tax his coat, tax his ties, tax his shirt, tax his work, tax his dirt, tax his tobacco, tax his drink, tax him if he tries to think, taxes cigars, taxes beers. If he cries, taxes tears. Taxes car, taxes gas. Find other ways to tax his ass. Tax all he has, then let him know that you won't be done till he has no dough. When he screams and hollers, then tax him some more. Tax him till he's good and sore. Then tax his coffin, tax his grave, tax the ground in which he's laid. Put these words upon his tomb. Taxes drove him to his doom. When he's gone, do not relax. It's time to apply the inheritance tax.
Yep.
It's
And you could take pretty much 75% of everything that is in that poem and say, hey, there's 4 levels of tax to each of these products.
yeah, and they go in different directions.
Yeah, that's it makes me sick sometimes, but you know, That's how we have to live.
Is it
Well, for now.
for now? That's correct. But that's why we are for agorism, right? Because in the meantime,
Absolutely.
it is the best way to avoid it and also to take power away from it.
Yes.
I
And
mean, in
you
my
know,
opinion.
well, yeah, absolutely. And if you go with Jack Spirka's definition of what an anarchist society would be, it's going to be a seventh generation. So we're not working for ourselves because we don't think that it's going to actually happen within our lifetimes. It may happen for our great 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 grandchildren if we do the right thing now. So hopefully that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Thinking ahead.
Yeah, because we can live as free as we want to, but it may not come to fruition in our lifetimes. So it's a wise man plants a tree that he knows he will never sit under.
Absolutely. That's when a society grows great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's a pretty good note to end it on, don't you think?
I think so.
All right. Well, it's been utterly fantastic talking about blacksmithing with you.
Yeah. Thanks
Well,
very much, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.
dude, we'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.